So good morning. It is 8:01, and I'd like to open up the Stockbridge Stewardship Commission meeting, and thank you all for coming. I sent the minutes of 3:18. Did anyone look over them, check them for typo?
I have something I'd like to say about the minutes. In the beginning of the minutes, it's stipulated that on Zoom participation were C. Kenny, Pat Kennelly, Anita Schwerner, and Clarence Fanto. I think that committee members who are on Zoom should be distinguished from the general public.
Okay.
So that in the future, somebody looking back will realize that I wasn't just a member of the general public, that I was on the committee, and that I was on Zoom, and then the members of the public would be different.
I can fix that, Charlie. Any other typos or anything? Seeing none, can we approve it with that fix, Charlie?
I make a motion to approve the minutes with that correction.
I second.
Michael. Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining. I didn't have a chance to go through it.
Roxanne abstain. Okay.
I didn't read it either. I'm guilty of not having read it, so I can't comment at this point. If there's a possibility to put it off just for whatever, otherwise, if the vote is.
It's already been approved.
Yeah, it's already been.
It's already
Okay.
been approved, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll just put abstain, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any citizens' questions, comments, or concerns at this time? So you don't have to wait the entire meeting?
Jamie,
Yes?
it's Pat.
Hi, Pat.
I just wanted to let you all know that last week, Ken Wagner had done a webinar on cyanobacteria treatments. And I had only gotten notice of it literally 24 hours before the meeting, and I did forward some of it to you in case somebody could join. It was 2.5 hours, and it's Ken Wagner, so it's sort of like taking a sip of water from a fire hydrant, an incredible amount of information and data. But they are going to cull it down, and I think I will be able to get a video of it and the slide presentation, and when I do, I will share that with all of you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do I see anyone else that has a question or comment?
Well, I would just make a comment that Bob Cortman is the expert on cyanobacteria as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Jamie, it's Jim. I did forward to you and Dr. Kenny that the DPH will be sponsoring some type of cyanobacteria bloom webinar in May. I don't have the information in front of you, but I did forward that to you and Dr. Kenny a couple weeks ago. So that may be of interest to people.
Okay, I can send it to our group.
Figure out how to turn this off.
All right. So, agenda items.
I think we're getting a little wow here. Does anybody hear that?
Yeah, what is
Hey, I'm trying to bring this up.
Roxanne's computer. She's fixing it.
Mute doesn't help. Leave it. I'm gonna come back. See if I can come back.
So we had talked about a couple of things to go over the prioritized list review of the lake management plan. Do people feel ready to go over that? Okay.
Well, I don't, I was in such a rush. I also did a spreadsheet. So that's what they've responded to here. And with Jamie's bullet points, which basically are in here. So what I wanted to do is try to set up a screen share so we can all look at what their comments are.
Okay.
So let me see if I can get back in here.
Steve, when Roxanne is ready, can you give her privileges to share?
Yes, of course, but I don't know. It looked like you were muted, Roxanne, so I don't know why we were getting that feedback.
I know. It's like when I join the meeting, I'm going to rejoin the meeting. Hang on, let me back out here. Close down a couple of things. All kinds of technical difficulties this morning. Launch the meeting. I just want it to come in.
Recording.
Wait, I see it. I just saw it. Hang on. There. Okay. So.
I think it's working.
I wonder if it's not gonna let me do this.
Do you need,
Geez, okay, we got it.
I think it, can everyone?
I have it.
Yep.
All right. And I had a hard copy, but. must
I have
left it
hard
on my-
copies at home. I gave you one. the other
Yeah, I
day.
left it on my desk.
Yeah, it's the one you sent the other day, right?
Yeah, I have one on my desk, but it's okay.
But they've now commented right on it, so that's what's on the screen share. And the yellow is what they've plugged in here. Can we get rid of that little, Steve, that this meeting is being recorded thing in the center? Can we make that go away?
Oh, I know how.
I don't see, I think that's only on your computer. I don't
No.
see it on the screen.
Oh, she just got rid of it. It was up on our screen, the
Okay.
room screen, but it's gone now.
It's all
Okay.
gone. Okay. Carry on. So, and also, I think
Let's see if I can-
it seems as though it might be important, to circle back to, remember when we talked about dredging and herbicide and the importance? And I think we all agree that we're all more leaning towards dredging would be the first priority. And even because maybe we can't permit all three, the dredging in, the herbicide and the harvester. But, it may, we don't know. It's still in the unknown. To circle back to if we still are in agreement, dredging would be our first project to go forward if with the money and permitting and getting it done in time, if it was possible. Are we in agreement or not in agreement with that?
Well, I think we need to, it would be fine if we take a vote on all of the priorities of each one of these items, because that's worrying about what can happen when is not what GZA needs to get the lake management plan done. That's a whole other issue. Now, they also weighed in, which I can screen share after, if we can get through prioritizing, but they also weighed in on herbicide versus dredging and have comments about that. And I haven't even had a chance to read it, so I'm going to be reading it for the first time. But I think if we, Jamie, if we just prioritize, and that we agree on and, and notate all the things that they've plugged in here to this spreadsheet, then I think we're pretty much ready to send something back in a finalized version, like, here you go, here's all of our priorities, here's what we're looking at, here's what we want included, and then they can move forward with finishing the plan.
Okay.
Michael has his hand up.
Go ahead, Michael.
With, it's hard to see everybody because with the spreadsheet up, but I thought we already voted on this 2 meetings ago.
We didn't take an official vote. No one wanted to. It's okay. Let's
Okay.
carry on. Let's carry on.
Okay, so can we understand what we're about at the present time on the agenda? What is the agenda point that we're on right now?
We're on agenda items, the list review, lake management plan.
Okay, so let's look at that and let's see what the first one is. What do we think? Do we feel, let's go down the list here. Let's see what we've got and see what we come up with.
Well, since what they responded to was on the spreadsheet, can we just go through the spreadsheet line by line that is up on
Yes.
this? All the same information is in there. Because they highlighted the first thing, and that's the water quality testing, but the ongoing and priority one. So they put a priority on it. On ongoing, I hadn't put priorities on them. I just had stated them as ongoing, but they're saying that's a priority one in their mind. And then they're just stipulating for each year, it's monthly. And then they put in some questions here. I don't know if you can read it. I don't know if I can blow this up, but let me try to make it there. Key times.
Well, that's a little too big for me. Can we put that back where it was in the first place? I don't know.
Oh, sure. I can reduce it again.
I mean, that makes sense that they commented on that to me, because we all know we're gonna do it regardless. We know that's a priority, but
Right,
I can see why
right,
having that data is huge. So
right.
that makes sense. I mean, that's a number
So-
easily missed by us because we know what's gonna happen.
Right. What's the goal to approve this?
We have to, what they're waiting for, what they've been waiting for a long time, is for us to fully prioritize all the items.
Which have already been prioritized.
Well, which we can, if Jamie feels we need to take an official vote, then we can take an official vote. But I would say if we go over this and we agree with priorities or discuss
So we
priorities,
could approve it
we
today.
could just approve this in one vote for like, okay, we're happy that everything's included. We've prioritized it. We agree and put our stamp of approval and it goes back and then they can proceed with the lake management.
Good, okay.
Roxanne, can you show me that left column that was up there to start with? I don't see it anymore.
Sure. The leftmost column is priority. The next column is category. Then I've put in a subcategory because we have some subcategories, potential actions, and then I put in the years, so it's kind of in timeline form, and then I put in notes.
Okay, so basically what this is,
Their comments are on the far right. You see Bob Cortman? He says some monitoring every year, more frequent and comprehensive until a responsive plan is developed for CHAB. Ultimately could adjust lake testing to selected critical times by growing degree days and storm pattern. So what he's saying, and it ties back to this key times by GDD and storms, is he's saying ultimately maybe the monitoring, the testing can be narrowed down to specific critical times, key times. So that's good news.
Roxanne, could we take columns E, F, G, H, and I and narrow them down so that we don't have to see them particularly? Then we can see, I think, the left-hand columns, which are the actual prioritizations, and then the comments on the same screen. You know what I mean? In other words, that E, F, G, H, I are just simply details of how the thing is going to happen, and most of them are blank.
Oh, come on. Yeah, it's not letting me change it. Hang on. Well, I can scoot back over. So here's our priorities.
Or
I
can you knock it down a little bit so we can see the whole screen at once? Because I think seeing the priorities on the left and then the comment, oh, that's better. Now we can see the comments on the right at the same time, becomes a little bit more understandable.
Okay, well, I can scroll back and forth. For some reason, one thing I think on this computer, the Office product is not completely set up because it's prompting me, so I'm not able to alter this document right now.
Oh, okay. All right. So basically, can I just see if I understand what I'm looking at in the spreadsheet? First place over on the left, we see that this whole spreadsheet is a combined thing of the original data points and everything that Jamie and you had put together. You organized it by time, sent it to GCA. GCA is giving us their feedback on that original set of bullet points. And on the left now, have they already organized this now so that we can assume that what is in the first row is their priority number one, or one of the thing that they would put on top? Can we assume that? Is that what they did?
Yes, well, yes, what they did is where I only had ongoing, they set those as priority one.
Good.
And that's all
Okay,
the
so-
water quality testing, invasive species monitoring, invasive non-plant species like zebra mussels. So they said, okay, those are ongoing, but they're also in our minds, priority one.
Okay, good. And then over on the right, column K, is Bob Cortland's specific explanations for partially what the prioritization principles were, but also the mechanisms by which those particular actions would be carried out.
Right, and then to the right of that is Steve Roy and Chris Main's comments.
I got it. Yeah, now I can see them. Okay, good. Yeah, all right. So shall we go? So you want to take this then one row at a time, and let's go down it?
Yeah, and why don't we just discuss each one and say whether we agree? I mean, I think their comments, certainly on the first, the water quality testing and invasive species monitoring is all reasonable. Does everybody agree? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we've already been doing this and by and large, the only thoughts I had was whether that's feasible. Are these dates, are these parameters that they've set feasible for the actual doing, the mechanism of doing? And if the answer is yes, I think I agree with the priorities, yeah.
well, we won't know. I mean, the thing is, these are plugged into a timeline. These are not necessarily hard and fast. The most important thing is that we just prioritize
Right.
how we feel about each one of these various approaches. But when things happen is completely up to permitting.
Right. No, I think the priority list is very accurate, and I think it's feasible. I think it's reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, now the other thing that they changed, the next thing that they changed was, well, they corrected me. I think I typed in pneumatic and they said hydraulic. But on aquatic plant control, they questioned whether that should be a 1. They said it's of important interest, but they're saying number 2. It's a 2.
Yeah, and I think that what we can see there is they're putting, if you look at the different rows, we have the testing program as the first priority, ongoing. The next one is to monitor the various plant species in the lake, which is another aspect of triggering responses and things like that. And then the first real action, besides testing and monitoring, the first real action is sediment remediation. That's the action. So we have testing, monitoring, but then something to be done. The first action is dredging. That's what they're putting up there. And I think that that's a very clear indication that the first action to be done is the dredging, which is what we've been discussing from time to time and sort of getting back and forth on the idea. But I totally agree with their placing, without any equivocation at all, with question marks or any of this other stuff, sediment remediation. That's what they got up as our first action. So I think that speaks to the idea that they think dredging is the most important action to be done.
Right, they've also shared, which I haven't even read yet, and we can bring up after we go through this, but they also shared comments on herbicide and dredging projects. So we'll have to see what they say, but I think we should get through this and then we can look at what they wrote. So let me see. They left herbicide as a 3. They didn't alter anything in that. Let's see if they got comments over here. So herbicide. So anyway, Bob Cortman is saying curly leaf is early season and repeated physical removal may be better than herbicides. Milfoil should be controlled well by very low dose fluridone. If contact herbicides are proposed, effects on lake respiration and internal nutrient load should be predicted and monitored. And then Chris Main and Steve Roy, general plan for future weed control needs to be described in the plan. What you have summarized and discussed would be included here. So those are their comments.
Roxanne, this is Pat. Shall I wait till we're done with all of this to comment, or is it appropriate to talk now?
Your choice. If this is the topic, go ahead. Well, you should be coming from
It's
Jamie
fine.
though.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, yes, that was
No,
inappropriate, Jamie.
It's
Jamie,
fine.
your
Go ahead.
call.
No, go
Okay.
ahead. Pat.
What I'm thinking, in terms of actions, and we're talking about priorities and actions, and the chart is correct in the sense of what year we would count, treat, verify, and then potentially treat again the whole lake. But my point is that that beginning of that process can happen this summer, and that's what we're proposing. And dredging is not going to happen this summer. So even though it may be your number one priority, it doesn't mean that everything else has to come to a screeching halt until that happens. And we can discuss the conflict or not conflict of having the two going on at the same time. But my simple point is that we can move forward with the herbicide test this season without interfering with dredging in and of itself.
Yep. Yeah, the other question, I think that Greg and Michael and I have discussed is, well, would it in any way, like in other words, when you're going through your verification year, could dredging be done that same year? But that's really not the main purpose of this agenda item right now. The agenda item is really to get everything prioritized and laid out and back to GZA so they can finalize the plan.
Indeed, Roxanne, I think the two issues are the actual timing of things, because they will obviously be doing a timeline. And that even though priorities may be set, the actions are not linear based on those priorities necessarily, because if the earliest dredging can be done is 2 years from now, it doesn't mean we don't do anything in the interim in these next 2 years. That's my only point.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, obviously, dredging is a huge deal. It's a big money item. It's a lot of moving parts, financing and town meetings, and the other stuff kind of moves a little more easily, where this is a big dollar item where it's gonna take some planning and whatnot. So that's totally understandable.
I'm still waiting for an answer back on the timeline of the permitting. So, and Greg has reached out to GZA as well about the dredging. So we're waiting for costing, but in terms of financing, we've talked about funding. And so the real tie-up now is just getting through that permitting process, but potentially, it could happen in 2023.
And prices right now for anything are probably good for about 10 days if you're lucky, if, with fuel prices and the big equipment they're gonna use, and
And fuel.
Yeah, the fuel's the big one.
Right, and the site preparation. I mean, the one
Yeah.
question that's out there also is, can the site preparation go out to bid and be done ahead of the actual dredging? Because you've got to have the deposition area. So that's all, we're waiting for design specs on that.
All right, let's keep.
Okay, so, and then let's see, we went over that guy. And then I had not put any priorities on the phosphorus loading. And let's see what they said about that. Because I didn't know how to prioritize that. We hadn't really talked about it as a priority. And underground phosphorus loading should be revealed by lake testing, especially spring. So that's Cortman. External load appears low, internal load is issue to address. So Charlie, they're saying, in their opinion, they think it's internal loading.
But that's always been the predominant method of loading for the lake, is the internal loading, or what's viewed as internal loading.
Okay. Benthic match should not pose a nuisance in,
But we want to keep it that way. We don't want to increase external loading. That's always been my point, is that, of course, the internal loading comes from an accumulation of sediment and stuff that went in a long time ago, and possibly underground sources. But the idea is that we want to make sure that the external loading we don't want to rest on our laurels and forget that having fertilizers and all sorts of other developmental issues around the lake wouldn't pose a future problem for the lake's external loading. That's the key, is we want to keep it so that we don't have a lot of external load.
okay. But I mean, do we want to prioritize these things, or do we just want to say these are things that would be under consideration as tools for us to utilize in the future?
Well, I'm still a little confused about what we're doing. I was hoping we could go down this row by row and say that this seems to be in the right spot, because I'm not sure what we've done so far with each of the rows above this. I like to be very concrete. I like to say, this is in a good spot. This is how we would prioritize it. We agree with their prioritization. Let's move down to the next row. And move down one row at a time and get it so that we have it in place. And if we come to a questionable row, then put it on the side and see if we want to put something above it. But otherwise, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing.
Well, you want to run through it row by row? Because I thought pretty much that's what we're doing. We only have a priority one, a bunch of priority ones, a priority two, and a priority three. And one that they've changed was aquatic plant control, weed harvesting. And they changed that from a 1 to a 2. And they thought that should be a 2 as an important interest, but those are the.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I'm holding everybody up. We're down now at phosphorus loading, which is row 15.
Right.
Yep, beyond the double black line.
Have we all agreed that the rows above are in the proper order that we would consider to be, assuming that from the top down is an explicit prioritization principle?
Yeah, and I understand also, Charlie, as Pat says, that if we can't do priority one, we jump to priority two.
Yeah,
Is that
some of these things are going to be going on all the time simultaneously. I don't think that the actual prioritization in terms of what we, as Roxanne pointed out, we need to get permitting in place, we need to move along, and we need to do things potentially about these things. So we want to have our prioritizations in place so that we can work to do them. Now, when they actually are accomplished, or how they're accomplished, or whether they're accomplished simultaneously and stuff like that, is slightly a distraction from what we're supposed to be focusing on doing. So that that they can be done all at the same time is one idea, but we do need to say to ourselves, do we want to work on this and make sure that when and if it can be done, it's in place. And we've done all the permitting, we've got the costing and the expenses in place for it, whatever we need to have in place. That's what I understand the principle of prioritization to be. It's not that we're going to be doing this one first. It's that we consider this to be the most important, and we need to work on it so that it will be able to be accomplished when we can do it.
Right, and that is the case, Charlie. In terms of dredging, that is an ongoing situation. And we made it very clear they have to go ahead with the permitting process. And so we're waiting for the estimate of how long do they think that's going to take. And getting costing and moving forward. So that's, you know, Michael and Greg have worked on this for so long. I think Michael should be able to address this. But we're moving forward with that, with the assumption that once we get permitting, I mean, obviously it has to be worked out, along with the herbicide treatment and testing, if that goes forward. But in the meantime, we have to be prepared to pull the trigger when we have the opportunity to do it.
Yes.
Michael, do you want to comment?
Well, I think you stated it very correctly. I have these earphones on, which I never put on, so I'm not sure if I'm being heard. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely, that this is an ongoing thing. And it's sort of like, what are our priorities in general? But what I wanted to go back was, why do you think GZA put harvester as a second priority?
I have the same question. I was gonna say the same thing.
It's such an important part of the bowl experience and ability to use the bowl from on so many levels. But I was just curious, is this something that they feel will make it easier for us to do one, or is it that they don't realize how important it is to us?
My thought is that maybe they put it second because if we're dredging, we're pulling up the weeds and the material, so you would do it second, but I don't know.
Right, no, we had agreed. I think we had discussed that, and everybody, I think, was in agreement that the year that we do the dredging, that we would agree that we weren't going to do the harvester if 2 projects or 3 projects weren't allowed at the same time. So,
Maxine, can we see column L and M while Michael's speaking about this, you know, just so we can see what their comments were about that?
Yeah. Let's see.
thank you, Charlie. Actually, that's a good idea.
Corbin had no comment. Chris and Steve, any past weed control activities, plans, and results need to be included. So obviously, yes, we need to include it. We want to include it. To us, it's more important. And one thing maybe what we could do is tweak this a little and just talk about strategic weed harvesting, because that's really what we do now, and what we've been limited to. So what we have permission to do now is limited weed harvesting, and is strategic. We would do it in specific areas where we think that there may be an issue. So maybe if we just reword this, do we want to keep it at a 1 and reword it?
I think it should be a 1. That's my opinion.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. My concern with keeping it at a 2 is it gives NHESP and DEP that much more leeway to make
Okay.
it difficult for us when we as a community realize it's an important part of our,
We already have a 3-year permit with 2 years still to go.
I
So,
understand.
no, what I'm saying is that I think that it should be a 1 also.
Okay.
We already have the permit.
So do we all agree it's a 1?
Yeah.
We all agree it should be 1.
Should
I
we
make
take
a motion
vote?
that we respond to that and say it should be a 1. They put a question mark there, questionable 1. I think they're begging the question. So I agree with Michael's suggestion that we make this a 1. I second that.
I vote for it. Change it to 1.
I'm a yes.
Aye.
I,
Okay, it's unanimous. Well, can we take a vote on all the priorities? At this point, assuming that we want that to be 1, are we okay with everything else?
can we look down further in the different rows there and just make sure that we know what's all there? We've discussed it all there.
Well, for this section, can we vote on?
Yeah, I would.
You mean section before the break, the black line?
Yeah, you got, this is all maintenance and actions to top. Okay, the next category is public education and awareness, where it's just, we're listing things.
And we also have to remember that people are watching, so they don't have, aren't as familiar as we are with the chart. That's why I'm just bringing up the black line, just to show people. not to
Well,
be.
I agree with Roxanne's suggestion. I'll make a motion that we approve with that change, changing the harvesting to a 1 category, a priority 1, that we approve the order that we have in this section.
Called the maintenance section.
Yes, the maintenance section.
Yeah, I second that.
So is this an official vote now?
Yes.
Okay.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wait, do you
I
have a
just have,
question?
so does
Okay.
that throw, number 2, is now, the aquatic plant control, the harvesting. So does that bring up the invasive species herbicide to a 2 now? Because there's nothing in number 2?
No, I don't think we move it up, do we?
That's
Yeah.
a curiosity question. So number 3, without any priority in the 2 list, the 2 section, does invasive
Oh,
herbicide go to a number 2 now rather than a 3? Because there's a number.
Seems to be
Right.
logical.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
number 1 obviously encompasses quite a few things, so
Okay,
yes, I'm fine with that.
okay, with those 2 changes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then, I don't know about, and so what I had done is I I group things together. So I have public education and awareness.
Can I just say one thing? I'm not sure with that vote that we did. I feel like, did we take a vote? What was the vote? Did it pass? What? I'm trying to, maybe I'm not seeing it from this distance.
You have it written down?
Yes. So Charlie made a motion to accept the maintenance section of the plan. John L. seconded. We all were in favor. There was a discussion by Mike Buffoni.
And we did put the harvesting,
And then the motion before that was that harvesting would go to first, not second. So it would be in the first category.
Thank you, Jamie. I just needed clarity.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we ready to move on here?
Please.
All right, we got public education and awareness. And so this is just what I threw out here, phosphorus loading and in regards to lawn and garden care. So again, this is public education and awareness, and I put a note in here based on past comments in our last meeting that the SBA will partner in this initiative. But, educating the public of the importance of proper, chemical disposal and appropriate lawn and garden care and fertilization so that they have to be sensitive to that. Septic maintenance, and this kind of falls to Tri-Town Health in terms of we obviously have to educate the public about regular maintenance and monitoring of their septic systems. On the other hand, I think it leads us into another conversation that'll be further down, municipal regulation and control in terms of, do we have any problem areas around the lake that Jim Willis is concerned about? Habitat protection, stormwater runoff, invasive species impacts. So this is all just public education and awareness, and I don't know that we have to categorize this. If everybody would like to categorize these things, I don't know that it's necessary. I think it's it should be an ongoing effort.
Any comments from Bob or Chris?
And let's see.
I have a little comment about this. I think that phosphorus loading is too limiting a concept. So for example, we're having these big trees chopped down right near the lake. There's what I would call thermal loading, okay, which is the increased temperature of the water coming down into the lake. There's salt possibly coming down into the lake. There's all sorts of other things coming in. It's not just phosphorus. So I would suggest that we make the category sort of analogous to the habitat protection, watershed protection. You know, we need to protect the entire watershed. It doesn't just involve phosphorus. It involves a whole set of concepts.
Okay, yeah,
And sediment, and another one.
yep,
I agree,
I
Charlie.
agree. I didn't drill down to that level of detail, but I think that's a great idea. Because I touch on salt down under municipal, but I didn't include it here, so that we can throw that in there. Now, in terms of their comments, Cortman, be aware of induced development and intensity of uses with sewer expansion.
What?
Not sure what that means. We'll have to ask him. Induced development and intensity of uses with sewer expansion. I think what he's getting at is when you expand your sewer, you got to worry about more,
You open up building lots that can't,
yeah, that otherwise they wouldn't be building on.
absolutely.
Oh, I heard it as there'll be more development if there's sewer.
Yeah,
That's what.
Okay.
yes,
I hear too.
exactly. I think that's what he's
Where you're
saying.
not gonna get a perk test,
Right.
sewer runs by, you can just hook to the house.
Yeah, right, you can say I can put
So that there's,
two more in this house in.
Yeah,
opens up a can of worms, yeah. Water softener brine has been shown to be an important contributor to salinization. So there's another good comment. So use of water softeners. Okay, so with the additions, because I can flesh that part out, I can add in, all the various types of loading. I can list them here. So are we good with that section?
Yeah, and I think Charlie's comment of the watershed, I think should be included in there because
Yeah.
that would be encompassing.
Yeah, exactly. Watershed protection in general, i.e., and it can include all these things.
And I
Okay.
just recently had the experience trying to teach people about stormwater runoff and cutting trees and then the water going into the lake and then the lake temperature.
Yeah,
And they're just, oh, it doesn't affect it. It's like, it does.
yeah, it does.
It does.
So, okay, and then I have a section on municipal regulation and control. Those are the things that the town and Tri-Town Health can actually be involved in. So Lake and Pond Overlay District, obviously, habitat protection. So, I mean, some of that tree issue, Charlie, would fall under this category. And that is, we could be advising possible bylaw changes to specifically the planning board and the select board.
And Concom.
Yep. And stormwater runoff, septic maintenance. So these are all things, though, that can be handled from a municipal point of view. So that we have the ability to regulate. However, we probably need to look at our bylaws and say, can we, make some specific changes that might better protect the watershed in the lake area. And then municipal roadway treatment impact. So this is, again, something that coming up, we're improving and we're buying new trucks and we're going to be better able to calibrate how much ice or salt we're using on the roads. And once we do that and we're capturing that information, then we can modify the amount of salt because we'll know if we cut back on the salt application, still have safe roads, then we know we can cut back. And then do we want to, at some point, have a whole conversation about, do we have areas where maybe we shouldn't be putting any salt down on the road? And that might be the causeway area. But, so there's all this category of what we can control as a municipality. And then down here, the very last thing was incident response and remediation. And I just threw this together really quick. So we've got cyanobacteria blooms. And they've marked that with a 1. So I'm sure that, Charlie, I'm sure you agree with that.
Well, it's the one thing that the Board of Health had to, in effect, close the lake for. I mean, if you have to close the lake down, it's not a good thing.
Right, because I hadn't categorized any of this at the bottom. I was just trying to throw all this on, and organize it in a certain way. So anyway, so we've got Corman. Corman's, he says response plan should be developed as part of water quality testing and diagnostic work. And Chris Main and Steve Roy, past and current bacteria sampling and results need to be added in the watershed plan. So, yep. And then GZA can assist with the watershed and flood/dam stability studies, not in the scope of this plan. I'm not sure what that means.
Roxanne, this is Jim. I had a question.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a couple comments related to the spreadsheet. One is under municipal education. And, Mike, you may be doing this, but we see a lot of sump pumps put into the sewer drain that goes into the municipal sewer. We see that a lot of that in Lee and Lennox. And when we have opportunities, we try to educate homeowners on that. So that was one point. And the second point under the municipal regulation, you may be covering this, but the Board of Health has an option too to have a local regulation on what we talked about a few months ago, not just bylaws. So you could always pop that in there if you want as another option further down the road. It's different layers. Like there's like town meeting bylaws through the planning board, but the Board of Health could explore an option maybe of having some type of local septic regulation that can require pumping, possible pre-treatment if you're within a certain setback to the lake, but that is an option we can possibly put in under municipal regulation for
Okay,
now.
great, thank you.
In the 1980s, when the plant was being built, the town had to adopt a lot of bylaws that DEP set forth, and sump pump bylaw is in there. It is, and actually, the food choppers there that go in your sink are not allowed either, but trying to police that is tough. But we do police sump pumps being into the sewer, and it's definitely a bylaw we keep track of for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike, and we control that as well through our septic plans. What's good to know that you do have a bylaw on garbage disposals that they're not allowed. I never knew that. Because Title V does allow for garbage disposals for septics it's a different design criteria, but now knowing that, I'll make sure that none of those are allowed. Not that I've ever seen many of them anyway in Stockbridge.
Yeah, and as far as the softeners that I don't know if it was Bob or Chris mentioned, if you have a septic system, you're not going to put your backwash brine into a septic tank, so it's going on the ground. If you have a well, if you're at town sewer, then you're going to put it into the sewer for sure. But so that's a good notation they put in there for sure, because a softener regenerates every 4 or 5 days. They put out a lot of salt on the ground, and if you're close to the lake, then it's going to end up in there eventually.
And those are the,
I totally agree, because Title V doesn't allow a backwash into the septic, so there's really no other choice. We should definitely think about that and how to strategically think about that and how to manage that later on as well.
and just to clarify, is that the people that use like the Culligan man, those chemicals?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we generally have groundwater around here is hard. If you don't have a softener, you're going to be dealing with hot water tank and.
Oh, the
issues.
crusty stuff.
Yeah, calcium and magnesium, builds up, yeah.
Now, as long as we're on this subject, can I ask Mike or Jim to weigh in on this? What do you think that swimming pools near very close to the lake are also a contributor to water, maintenance kind of water chemical inputs?
Well, you got to backwash your pool filters every now and then. I have a saltwater pool, in-ground pool, and any pool that I've ever seen just discharges onto the ground. Whether chlorine is not going to be an issue at all, because it's just the chlorine residual will get chewed up by the ground, the contaminants in the soil and whatnot, unless it's like running right into the lake. But as far as the salt, if somebody has a saltwater pool, depending on where they discharge and it's no different than having a softener, really. It's just basically a large softener discharging onto the ground. I don't think
Yeah, that
anybody,
makes sense. That makes sense to me.
I don't think anybody discharges pool water to a town sewer or their septic. I mean, if they're not gonna put it in their septic, it backwashes onto the ground. So it's another thought, yeah.
That's interesting.
Charlie, oh.
Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, how many pools do you think there are around the lake?
I think there's a lot.
Really?
I just
Right.
saw one being built yesterday
There's a new one.
Okay.
on Lake,
One.
right off before you get to Lake Drive, and it's not too far from the lake.
Right, so what distance, Mike, do you think is a safe distance for anyone using a pool when they recycle their water or whatever?
I have no idea what
No
that.
idea, right.
Yeah, it might be something more for Jim. I don't know if there's any.
Jim, do you have any
No,
idea?
so we don't regulate private pools. That would be the building code and the building commissioner. But I will tell you from just a common sense perspective,
Uh-huh.
if we're talking in-ground pools versus above ground, you're not going to have an in-ground pool encroaching upon seasonal high groundwater. It's too much. It'll pull out the pool. So you got to have a certain set. I mean, you're not going to put an in-ground pool 50 feet from the water line because
It wouldn't be allowed, right.
you have physical groundwater 14, 15 inches below grade that, you'll just, the in-ground pool would just it'd be a geyser of groundwater coming up. So you got to have a certain setback, but the building code would regulate private pools, not tri-town. We only do the public and semi-public.
Right, no, I was just, I didn't mean the regulation, I meant just from a biological point of how much filtration do you need for it not to affect the lake, how much distance with ground, it goes into the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot about pools. It depends on how big the pool is,
Right.
how often it's being used. I mean, some people will backwash once a week, depending on the use. It could be twice a week, and you don't really, depending on the size of the equipment and stuff, you're not backwashing for a half hour onto the ground. It's just enough to clear the filter out. Then it kind of goes back, and then typically that will just percolate through the soil. I mean, like, unless people are discharging and backwashing right into the lake. But again, I don't know from a biological sense if that is really much of an issue. Because like the solution to pollution is dilution. If you're throwing 2 gallons into a lake with millions of gallons, it's not really going to make much of an effect.
Yeah, you're maybe backwashing a pool filter. I have a 20,000 gallon pool and I backwash it maybe 20 to 30 seconds, if that. And the salinity, the saltwater pool is like, the salt content is like a 12th to a 14th of the salt that's in the ocean. So it's not super saline, really have a high salt content. So, like Jim said, it's going to percolate down through the soil, and it's probably a lot less salt than we're dumping out on the trucks on the causeway. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
All right, let's keep going.
Wait, let's move.
All right, so anyway, we had flood, drought. They're saying flood would be probably not part of this plan. And then I just put in possible things that could happen because I was just throwing out ideas. Fish die off, and they're saying, well, that would be due to anoxia. As far as I know, we've never had an incident like that. So that can be a conversation with them in terms of whether or not they think something like that would have to be included, but obviously we would
We
be.
did have a little fish die off 2 years ago. Remember that,
did?
Michael? We went down and took a look at it. It was on the western part of the lake, mostly, as far as I could tell. I don't think we figured out what it was, but it wasn't, it didn't involve the whole lake.
Okay, well, if we have any information about that, if that's documented anywhere, that might be useful for them to see.
Did Cortman or Chris have any comments on the
Yeah, on the fish die off thing,
Yeah.
yeah. related to anoxia, especially for cold water species, carryover. This can be tied to water quality monitoring by GZA. Need to include plan monitoring past and present as with other biota. If this is a concern for SBSC, is this tied to anoxic issue? But I think it's pertinent if we have had that situation in the past, that we share any information we have on what might have
The
happened.
first thing to do too is call Fish and Game.
Yeah.
Fish and Game likes to know if there's die off and they'll come in and.
Did you ever get a hold of somebody from?
Yeah, I sent the fish into Fish and Game, actually. I forget where else I sent it. And it was just as cold water anoxia. I didn't think there was anything particularly about it. It's just something to know that we've had in the past. And from what I understand, isn't necessarily, if it's not too widespread, it's not a big deal.
Okay. Can you email me like a little blurb of that and then I can include it in anything that goes back to GZA?
Yeah, I'll see what I can dig up.
Okay, yeah, just a
And then what was next?
summary. Okay, and then the very last thing is just, and this is not really part of the plan, this is all things that I proposed to have as addenda. And that is an ecological inventory of all native species and an ecological inventory of all invasive species. We need to know what's there. And obviously up above, we are monitoring, that's a high priority item. And I think amphibians is not on here. I added it later, so it would also include amphibians. And this is going to take time. So they've got mollusks, they've got GZA, they've typed in GZA 2015 survey and 2016 monitoring reports. Obviously, we have the Tom Coote reports that will need to be included. And one little tidbit that came up in talking to Sally Underwood Miller, that I was talking to her about the eagles, and I was concerned about locating the eagle nests because we may end up with a special permit in front of the select board. So I want to know where those eagles are. And I was going to suggest drones, the use of drones to find those. And apparently Jay Rind had already come up with that idea. So that may be getting explored by Jay Rind to locate the eagle nests. So we know what the impact is on that particular species for that eight hawthorn.
And I would be very cautious on using a drone around an eagle's nest, because if it, I would be.
Yes, Charlie. Michael's
I don't want
talking.
to, just raising my hand. I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted you to see that when Mike is done, I'd like to say something.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Oh, that's a
Okay,
good
anyway,
point.
so I think this is a very important aspect of the ongoing assessment of the lake. And I would also like to add, besides the actual species that are in the water, and the sort of allusion to the idea that there might be habitats around the water, like for the birds particularly, I'd like to actually look at the idea of categorizing and putting into an inventory the native species and invasive species or whatever around the lake. So when you have 80-foot trees, those are considered to be important aspects of things. And when you have, in other words, I think that watershed habit, the plants in the immediate vicinity of the lake are also a very important aspect of the balance of the ecology in the lake. So I'd like to add on to that in the immediate watershed as well.
Yeah, and that certainly was my intent, and we can make sure that that's actually stipulated here, that we're not talking just the lake, we're talking the lake and the watershed, the immediate watershed area.
But I would like to echo what Mike's concern was. I would, whoever does that, and I'm no expert by any means, but maybe just consult with someone, if you do use a drone, what a setback and elevation, height separation, so you don't disturb that protected species. I have no idea what that even would look like, but if you do that, I would just recommend they just maybe do some research or talk to someone on that.
Yeah, I would think that Jay would do that, but we can talk to him. So, and then let me see, they made aquatic plants, obviously, they've made a comment. Also, 2015 survey and 2016 monitoring reports. So they have information about that. We've got the Dr. Coot, as I mentioned, and the 2018 and 2019 SBA studies. So every report has already been handed over to them, as far as I'm aware. And so all of that will be included in this particular plan. And then they put it in red down at the bottom, they've added this. As of 11/8/2013, NHESP letter response to information request, Marstonia lustrica, endangered snail, bridal shiner, fish of special concern, and Hill's pondweed, plant of special concern. So obviously, so they're just highlighting the ones that they're aware of.
Now, as far as the report, I did a records request, a while back, and from Fish and Game, and they released the reports on the inventory they did with the electrofishing on the bowl and sent it to everybody on this committee. I don't know if that's been forwarded to the GZA or not for fish inventory, fish species in the lake, but that's something I emailed a while back. It's still on my computer. I can re-forward it.
Okay.
If need be, but that's, we talked about that a year or two ago, and
I remember that.
I
Yep.
had to do a records request for the state, and then they sent it to us.
Okay, well, yeah. We'll have to tie up all the loose ends, because we have an awful lot of reports and, but I think ultimately it'll all come together. But all that, this piece is really an addenda. That's
Yeah.
separate from managing. So, okay, so are we good with all the changes that we discussed? I can incorporate them and then get this back to GZA?
Do we want to vote on it? We voted on the maintenance portion up to the
Yep.
double black line. We can probably vote on the rest of it. I move that we approve the entire spreadsheet as discussed.
A second? I need a second.
Second,
Charlie, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Michael?
I definitely am in favor. And I think, I could be wrong, but we're in favor, but we may have to, as things go on, we may have to change it. Everybody understands that this is not set in stone. It's
These are recommendations.
right, okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is just so they can go back to the drawing board and they can try to finalize the lake and watershed management
Right, but for
plan.
those people
But
that
the
are not in
plan
this,
itself, right, and the plan itself, though, is a living document. So clearly, year to year, it has to be reviewed and it may be altered year to year based on the current conditions.
I just wanted to let everybody understand that, and especially people that are not on this board, also to understand that this is our recommendation.
Right, and then it would also probably need to be reviewed by the people. It's not, we wouldn't keep it from them.
Well, this is a public meeting, so everybody,
Right.
yeah.
But once it's finalized.
Yeah.
All right.
Roxanne, I have to thank you for leading us through this process.
Go ahead.
Just a thank you.
Oh, okay, you're welcome.
So, do we have any updates on the water testing, Michael? Is it?
I talked to Chuck Tuesday or Wednesday. He is gonna get his boat in the water pretty soon, so we're shooting for the latter part of April to get out for our first round of sampling and data collection.
Great. Okay. Any updates from either Jim or John about the Lake Drive septic information or your commission, your committee meeting?
We've already reported I reported on the last meeting that we had with the sewer water, where we talked about a meeting that we had with the selectmen present. Since then, there've been some correspondences regarding the spreading, the extension of the sewer. And these were questions by email from the Lake Drive Association. And Mike Canales I just received a copy of his letter that he sent to the Lake Drive Association, explaining to them the 4-phase project that we are in. And that sewer extension is really a little bit further down the road and possibly not even in the next 4 years. Maybe it's a 5-year plan that we're looking at. And we sort of explained to them that we have some greater priorities to deal with, but we are continuing to discuss this and coming up with ideas.
Yeah, and that, just to add to that, that would be town-funded expansion.
Right.
You know,
Oh, okay.
where the town's gonna go out and pay, we have quite a laundry list of DEP stuff to, hoops we need to jump through before any expansion goes by the funding of the town, let's put it that way.
And would it be different if they gave money to this project or
Who's they?
the Lake Drive
If somebody
Association?
wants to fund their own expansion,
Yeah.
like there's another group of people on Everett Road that are looking to do the same thing.
Okay,
It all goes in front of the Water and Sewer Commission, and if
Okay.
a lot of sewer in the town has been funded by the users themselves on a road if they wanna,
okay.
if they're in a situation
So it is
where there's.
possible if they
Oh,
have.
yeah, yeah, for
Okay.
sure. It's just right now, the sewer user fund can't
Okay,
fund, just, expanding sewer.
can privately. Okay. Any questions about that? All right, any other information germane to,
Well, I'm wondering if we want to take a look at their comments about herbicide and dredging, because they did send us a Word document, which I haven't had a chance to read yet. So do you want
I
me
don't know
to?
has the group read it?
I'd sent it to everybody, but none of us have seen it.
So,
But we can see it now, is what I'm saying. I could do a screen share of it.
Well, I'd like to see that and read it and think about it before anything. So I would prefer to have that, let the chair send it around to everybody, and then we can look at it and put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Well, I forwarded that whole group to all of us so that we would all have the documents, because it's tough
That was this morning?
this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay, I can do that. All right, our next meeting would be April 15th. I don't know if that works. There's no school that day, but I don't know if it's a problem at 8 AM for people.
Yeah, my daughter, who was supposed to have an appointment this afternoon, we didn't have prior authorization nailed down, so it's been pushed out to the 15th, and it's in the morning on the 15th, so I won't be
How
able
about
to
the
be here.
22nd?
Sure. Or we could do it on a different day of the week, I suppose.
No, let's keep it Friday.
Oh, no, because of John, we couldn't do Wednesdays, so.
No,
Yeah,
let's-
22nd is fine.
All right, so the next meeting is April 22nd at 8 AM, Zoom and Town Hall. I'd like a motion to close.
So moved.
So moved.
John, and all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.